Please marry my mama, Miss Stursh, is all I have now whispered to the little girl to the silence rancher. The twin sons of Hearth 9 were low in the sky when Elia's crow finished repairing the outer fence of his ranch. Their light washed the wide fields in soft gold and deep orange, making the tall, blue-green grass shimmer like a quiet ocean. The air smelled faintly sweet, carried by the glowing grain plants that only grew on this distant world. Elias stood still for a moment, leaning on his tool, and watched the wind move across the land. He liked this time of day. It was calm. It was honest. The world did not ask him to speak. His ranch sat far from the main colony roads, close to the edge of the frontier. Most people who traveled this way were traders, explorers, or people running from something they did not want to talk about. Elias never asked questions. He fixed machines, offered water, and sometimes a place to sleep. Then he watched them leave again under the wide, endless sky. He had chosen this life on purpose. Elias turned toward the barn, where a group of floating herd creatures drifted slowly inside their glowing pen. They looked like large, soft clouds with gentle eyes and long, ribbon-like tails. They hummed quietly as they moved, a low, peaceful sound that filled the air like music. Elias checked the power lines and nodded in approval. Everything was working. That was when he heard a strange sound in the distance. It was not the wind. It was not the hum of the herd. It was a sharp, uneven noise like metal struggling against the sky. Elias looked up. A small cargo shuttle was limping through the clouds, smoke trailing behind it in thin, gray lines. Its lights flickered as it lost height, drifting sideways like a wounded bird. Elias dropped his tool and ran toward the open field near his landing pad. The shuttle came down hard but not dangerously. The ground shook as its landing legs touched the soil. Dust and glowing pollen filled the air, sparkling in the sunset light. Elias shielded his eyes and waited until the engines fell silent. For a moment there was only quiet. Then the side door of the shuttle opened slowly. A woman stepped out first. She looked tired, her dark hair pulled back in a messy tie, her clothes dusty and worn. She held the hand of a small girl who stayed close to her side, half hidden behind her leg. Elias raised a hand in greeting but did not speak. The woman hesitated, then walked forward carefully. "I'm sorry to land without asking," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Our engine failed. We saw your power lights from the sky." Elias nodded once. He pointed toward the barn and the small house beside it. Then he held up two fingers and made a simple motion, showing food and rest. The woman's shoulders relaxed a little. "Thank you," she said. "I'm Mara. This is my daughter, Lena." The girl peeked out from behind her mother. She had wide, curious eyes and hair that caught the light of the suns, shining like soft copper. She did not speak, but she watched Elias very closely. Elias led them inside the house. It was simple, made of stone and metal, with a long table, a few chairs, and shelves filled with tools and spare parts. The kitchen was small but clean. He poured water into cups and set out some bread and dried fruit from his storage box. Mara sat down and let out a long breath, like she had been holding it for a very long time. Lena climbed onto the chair and swung her legs, looking around the room like it was a place from a storybook. Elias went back outside to check the shuttle. It took him most of the evening to find the problem. A cracked fuel line, old and tired. He worked quietly, the stars beginning to appear above him one by one. The sky on Hearth 9 was deep and wide, filled with slow-moving clouds of purple and silver light from distant nebulae. As he worked, he felt eyes on him. He turned and saw Lena sitting on the porch steps, hugging her knees. She did not look afraid. She looked thoughtful. Elias nodded at her once and went back to work. After a while, Mara came out too. She stood beside him, watching his hands move over the metal. "You're very good at this," she said. Elias shrugged slightly. "We were part of a research team," Mara continued. "We were studying the plants on a nearby world, but the colony didn't last. Storms, power failures. People left," she paused. "My partner didn't make it." Elias did not ask questions. He simply kept working. Mara smiled sadly. "You don't talk much, do you?" Elias shook his head. Lena slid off the steps and walked closer. She reached out and touched one of the tools, then quickly pulled her hand back like it might bite her. Elias picked up a small, harmless light wrench and handed it to her. Lena's face lit up. She held it like a treasure. Mara laughed quietly. "Careful, sweetheart." Lena pretended to tighten a bolt on the shuttle, copying Elias' movements. Elias watched her for a moment, then nodded in approval. She stood taller, proud of herself. By the time the shuttle was fixed, the suns were gone and the stars ruled the sky. The field glowed softly from the bioluminescent plants, turning the land into a sea of tiny blue lights. Mara and Lena stayed the night. Elias gave them the small spare room. It had only 2 beds and a narrow window, but it was warm and safe. Lena pressed her face to the glass and stared at the glowing fields outside. "It looks like the stars fell down," she whispered. Mara brushed her hair back. "It does, doesn't it?" Elias stood in the hallway listening. He felt something strange in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. The next day, Lena followed him everywhere. She watched him feed the floating herd, laughing when one of them gently bumped into her like a curious balloon. She helped him water the glowing grain, carefully pouring from a small container he gave her. She asked questions, many questions about everything. Elias answered some with gestures, some with simple words, some with quiet smiles. Mara worked in the garden behind the house, studying the soil and the plants. She talked about how the crops here could help other worlds grow food in hard places. Elias listened while he fixed a broken fence post. That evening the wind picked up, carrying soft lights from the fields into the air like drifting fireflies. Elias walked out to guide the herd back into their pen. Lena followed him into the glowing grass. They stood alone under the wide, shining sky. Lena looked up at him, her small face serious. Elias waited. She tugged gently on his sleeve. "Please marry my mama, mister," she whispered. "She's all I have now." The words hit him harder than any storm or falling ship ever could. Elias did not speak. He looked out at the glowing fields, at the gentle creatures floating back toward their pen, at the stars that seemed so far away and yet so close. Lena watched his face, waiting for something. After a long moment, Elias knelt down and pointed toward one of the herd creatures. It drifted closer, humming softly. Lena smiled and reached out to touch it. Elias stood back up. He did not answer her question. But that night, as the ranch glowed under the endless sky and the quiet house held 3 people instead of 1, Elias felt something begin to change inside him. Morning came slowly to the ranch on Hearth 9. The twin suns rose behind the hills, their light spilling across the glowing fields like warm water. The soft blue plants dimmed as daylight touched them, and the floating herd creatures drifted lower, settling into their quiet morning routine. Inside the house, Elias sat at the small table holding a cup of hot tea. He had not slept much. Lena's whispered words from the night before stayed in his mind, moving around like the wind in the tall grass. He was not used to being asked for something so big. He was not used to being needed. Mara moved quietly in the kitchen, preparing simple food from what Elias had stored. Bread warmed on a small heating plate. Fruit slices rested on a metal tray. The room filled with a gentle, sweet smell. Lena came out of the spare room, still half asleep, her hair messy and her eyes heavy. When she saw Elias, she smiled wide and ran to sit on the chair beside him. "Good morning, mister," she said. Elias nodded. "Morning." It was one of the few words he used often. Mara noticed and smiled to herself. They ate together in calm silence. It was not the uncomfortable kind. It was the kind that felt like sitting beside a river and listening to it move. After breakfast, Elias went outside to check the power station near the barn. Lena followed him again, carrying a small bag that Mara had filled with snacks and a bottle of water. The wind was stronger today, pushing the tall grass into slow waves. The sky was clear, bright, and wide. Elias climbed onto the metal platform near the power unit and began checking the glowing cables that ran from it into the ground. Lena sat below, watching. "Do you ever go to other worlds?" she asked. Elias paused. "Used to." "Why don't you now?" he thought for a moment. "This place needs me." Lena looked around the open land, the barn, the house, the drifting creatures. "It's very big," she said, "but it's very quiet too." Elias nodded. "Yes." She kicked her feet against the platform. "Mama says quiet can be good, but sometimes it's lonely." Elias felt those words settle deep inside him. Later that day, a small trade ship passed overhead. It did not land, but its shadow crossed the fields like a dark cloud. Lena watched it disappear into the sky. "Are we leaving today?" she asked Mara. Mara hesitated. "We could," she said, "but our fuel isn't full yet, and your mama still needs to check her equipment." Lena looked at Elias, hopeful. Elias said nothing, but he walked toward the fuel tanks and began checking the valves. Mara watched him, understanding without words. In the afternoon, Mara worked in the small lab space she had set up in the house. She studied samples of the glowing plants, taking notes on a simple screen. Elias repaired a broken gate near the far edge of the field. Lena ran between them, carrying messages that were not really needed, just an excuse to stay busy. The ranch felt alive in a way it never had before. As the suns began to fall again, the sky turned orange and purple. Elias guided the herd back into their pen. Lena helped, waving her arms and laughing when one of the creatures gently spun in circles instead of moving forward. Myra stood on the porch watching them. Her face was soft, thoughtful. That night, they sat outside by a small heat lamp. The stars were bright and close, like they could be touched. Elias fixed a broken device while Myra talked about her work. "These plants," she said, holding a glowing leaf, "they can grow in almost any soil, cold worlds, dry worlds, broken worlds. They could help people survive where they thought they couldn't." Elias looked at the leaf, then at the wide land around them. "This place helped me," he said quietly. Mara looked at him, surprised. It was more than he usually said in a day. Lena leaned against Elias' arm, her eyes slowly closing. The next morning, a message came through the old communication tower near the barn. Elias hadn't used it in months. The screen flickered to life with a simple text signal. A colony ship was passing through the system in 3 days. It was offering transport to a growing world far from the frontier. Scientists, workers, families, all were welcome. Myra read the message twice. This was what she had been waiting for. A chance to take her research somewhere it could truly help people. A place where Lena could go to school, make friends, grow up safe. Her hands shook slightly as she lowered the screen. Lena noticed. "Mama," Mara knelt down. "We might be going on a big trip," she said gently. Lena looked toward Elias. Elias stood still, staring at the glowing fields. That day felt different. Mara packed some of their things, slowly, carefully. Lena helped, but she kept stopping to run outside to check on the herd, to sit on the porch steps. Elias worked longer than usual, fixing things that did not really need fixing. That night, Lena did not go to bed right away. She sat beside Elias in the barn, watching the creatures float and hum. "Will you be okay if we go?" she asked. Elias looked at her. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to be honest. "I've been okay before," he said. Lena frowned. "That doesn't sound the same." Elias smiled a little. Myra stood in the doorway, listening. Later, under the glowing sky, Elias walked to the far edge of the field. The wind moved around him, cool and soft. He thought about the rescue ships he used to fly, the people he used to save, the family he once had and lost among the stars. He had come here to be alone. But somewhere between a broken shuttle and a small girl's whisper, that plan had changed. The next day, the colony ship appeared in the sky, a bright line of light moving slowly across the stars. It would land the following morning. Mara finished packing. Lena did not. That night, the three of them sat in silence, watching the glowing fields. Finally, Elias spoke. "This place doesn't have to be just mine," he said. "It can be more." Mara turned to him, her eyes wide. Lena smiled like she already knew. The wind carried the soft hum of the herd across the land. The stars watched quietly as something new began to take shape on the lonely ranch at the edge of the world. The night after Elias spoke those words, the ranch did not feel the same. The air seemed warmer, even though the wind from the hills was cool. The glowing fields shimmered softly, and the floating herd creatures hummed in a slow, gentle rhythm, like they were listening. Mara lay awake in the small spare room, staring at the ceiling. Lena slept beside her, hugging a small, soft toy made from dried grass and cloth that Elias had once shaped for her with careful hands. Mara's mind kept returning to what Elias had said. "This place doesn't have to be just mine. It can be more." She did not know exactly what he meant, but she felt the weight of it. It sounded like a door opening, a door she had not expected to find here on a quiet ranch at the edge of the stars. Outside, Elias stood near the barn, looking up at the sky. The colony ship was a bright point of light moving slowly across the dark. It would land in the morning. He knew what that meant. A choice. A real one. He remembered another sky long ago, filled with alarms and flashing lights instead of stars. He remembered flying through broken space, guiding rescue ships toward colonies that were failing. He remembered holding his own child in a small cabin, promising safety, promising a future. He remembered the promise breaking. Elias closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Hearth 9 had given him quiet. It had given him space to heal. But now it was offering him something else. Morning came with soft light and low clouds drifting over the hills. The air smelled fresh, and the plants in the fields glowed faintly before fading into their daytime colors. Lena was the first one awake. She ran outside barefoot, laughing as the cool grass touched her feet. She chased one of the smaller herd creatures, which floated away slowly, pretending to be very fast. Mara followed, holding a cup of warm drink. She watched Lena play, then looked toward Elias, who was fixing a small solar panel near the house. "You didn't sleep much," she said gently. Elias shook his head. "Neither did you," she smiled. "No." They stood together in quiet for a moment, watching the clouds move. "The ship lands today," Mara said. Elias nodded. "I should be excited," she continued. "It's everything I wanted, a place to work, a place for Lena to grow, a real home." Elias looked at the land around them. "This is a real home, too." Mara studied his face. He did not look like a man asking her to stay. He looked like a man offering something and ready to let it go. That made the choice harder. The sound of the ship came in the late morning, a low, deep hum that rolled across the sky like distant thunder. Lena ran to the open field, pointing and jumping as the bright silver shape grew larger. It landed far away near the old colony pad. A tall tower of light rose from it, marking its place. Mara's bag sat by the door. Lena stared at it, then at Elias, then back at the bag. They walked together toward the landing pad. The wind picked up, carrying dust and glowing pollen through the air. The ship was massive, its sides smooth and shining, covered in symbols from many worlds. People moved around it. Families, workers, travelers. Voices filled the space with sound and life. Lena held Elias' hand without thinking. He let her. Mara spoke with a crew member, showing her research files. The crew member nodded, impressed, and pointed toward the boarding ramp. "We'll be leaving in 1 hour," he said. Mara thanked him and stepped back. Lena tugged on Elias' sleeve. "I don't want to go," she whispered. Elias knelt down. "Your mama needs to do important things," he said. "She helps people." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "You help people too." Elias felt his chest tighten. They walked away from the ship and sat on a low stone near the edge of the field. The noise of the crowd faded into the background. Mara sat beside them, holding her bag in her lap. "I don't know what the right choice is," she said quietly. "I've been running from place to place since the colony fell, always looking for the next safe world, the next chance." She looked at Elias. "But this place, it feels safe, not just because of the land, because of you." Elias looked down at the ground. "I don't have much to offer." "You have a home," Mara said, "and a heart you pretend not to." Lena smiled at that. A group of children ran past them, laughing, chasing each other near the ship. Lena watched them, her face thoughtful. "Do they have glowing fields?" she asked. Mara smiled sadly. "I don't know. Do they have floating friends?" Lena nodded toward the herd creatures in the distance. "I don't know," Mara said again. Lena stood up and walked a few steps toward the ranch. She turned back. "I like our stars better." Mara laughed softly, then sighed. Time passed. The ship's lights began to change color. The boarding ramp glowed brighter. Mara stood up, holding her bag. She looked at Elias. "This is the part where I say goodbye," she said. Elias stood too. They faced each other, the wind moving between them. "You don't have to," Elias said. Mara searched his face. "Are you asking me to stay?" Elias took a long breath. "I'm asking you to build something here with me, not just for us, for others." Mara felt tears rise to her eyes. Lena jumped up and down. "Does that mean I can keep my room?" Elias smiled. "Yes." Mara laughed through her tears. She looked back at the ship, then at the wide land behind Elias, the glowing fields, the quiet barn, the small house that had somehow become full. She set her bag down on the ground. "I'm staying," she said. The ship lifted off without them. Its light faded into the sky, becoming just another star. That night the ranch felt brighter than ever. They cooked together, laughing when Lena dropped a piece of bread, and one of the herd creatures tried to float away with it. Mara brought out her research tools and began planning how to turn part of the land into a growing center for the glowing plants. Elias offered to build new shelters and storage spaces. Lena drew pictures on the floor with colored chalk. Pictures of the ranch, the stars, and 3 small figures holding hands. Days passed. A trader stopped by and stayed for water and rest. Then another traveler. Then a small group of workers looking for a place to repair their machines. Word spread. The quiet ranch became a place people talked about, a safe place, a kind place. Mara taught visitors about the plants. Elias fixed their tools and ships. Lena greeted everyone like they were old friends. One evening, as the sun set low and the fields began to glow, Elias and Mara stood together on the porch. "I never planned for this," Elias said. "Neither did I," Mara replied. Lena ran up and hugged both of them at once. The stars came out one by one, watching over a ranch that was no longer just a place to be alone, but a place where people could begin again. The ranch on Hearth 9 changed slowly, like a seed growing into a tree. It did not become loud or crowded. It became warm. Ships began to appear in the sky every few days. Some were small, worn, and tired, like they had traveled a long way with little rest. Others were bright and new, piloted by people who had only heard stories about the quiet ranch at the edge of the stars. No matter how they arrived, they were all greeted the same way, with water, with food, with space to breathe. Elias stood near the landing field most mornings, watching the sky. He no longer waited in silence. He waited with purpose. Myra worked in the growing fields behind the barn. She had marked rows in the glowing soil, planting different kinds of plants that could survive in hard places. Travelers often stopped to watch her work, curious about how something so soft and bright could grow in such rough land. Lena became the heart of the ranch. She ran from ship to ship, waving at new arrivals, asking them where they came from and what their stars looked like. Some travelers brought her small gifts: a smooth stone from a red desert world, a ribbon from a floating city, a tiny music box that played soft tones when she turned a handle. She kept them all in a box under her bed. One afternoon, a large transport ship landed near the field. It was old and heavy, and it took a long time for its engines to quiet. When the doors opened, a group of families stepped out. They looked tired, carrying bags and holding children close. Myra went to meet them, offering water and places to sit. Elias helped move their ship away from the landing zone so others could come and go. Lena walked up to one small boy who stood alone, holding a broken toy in his hands. "Do you want to see the floating friends?" she asked. The boy nodded. She took his hand and led him toward the barn. That evening, the ranch was full of quiet voices and soft laughter. People sat around the heat lamps, sharing stories about their journeys. Some spoke about worlds that were too cold, too dry, or too broken to stay on. Some spoke about dreams of finding a place where they could stop running. Elias listened. Mara noticed how he stayed close to the people, even if he did not say much. She saw how he fixed a woman's broken scanner, how he helped a tired man lift a heavy bag, how he showed a group of children how to guide the herd creatures without scaring them. He was still the silent rancher, but he was not alone anymore. One night after everyone had gone to sleep, Myra and Elias sat on the porch looking at the stars. "I never thought I would stop moving," Myra said softly. "I thought my life would always be about finding the next place, the next chance." Elias nodded. "I thought my life would be about staying in one place and keeping the world out." They both smiled a little. Lena slept inside, her small box of treasures beside her bed. The next morning, a message came through the old communication tower. It was from a nearby colony. Their power systems were failing and their crops were not growing. They had heard about the glowing plants on Hearth 9. They were asking for help. Mara read the message twice. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with purpose. "This is why I studied," she said. "This is why I stayed." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll help." They gathered a group of volunteers from the travelers who were staying at the ranch. Engineers, farmers, pilots, people who had skills and nowhere to use them. Lena helped pack supplies, placing small tools into large boxes like they were toys. A small fleet of ships left the ranch that afternoon, carrying plants, knowledge, and hope to a struggling world. The ranch did not feel empty when they left. It felt like it had sent part of itself into the stars. Days passed, then weeks. The group returned with good news. The colony's power was stable. The plants were growing. Children were playing in fields that had once been bare. The ranch celebrated that night. People sang soft songs from different worlds. Lena danced around the heat lamps, laughing. Elias watched her and felt something warm and strong inside him. Later, as the night grew quiet, Lena sat between Mara and Elias, looking up at the sky. "Do you think the stars know about us?" she asked. Mara smiled. "Maybe." Elias thought for a moment. "Maybe they're watching to see what we do." Lena nodded seriously, like this was very important. One evening, a storm rolled in from the hills. Not a dangerous one, but strong and loud. The wind pushed against the barn, and the rain fell in shining sheets across the glowing fields. Travelers gathered inside the house and barn, sitting close together, listening to the sound of the storm. Lena was a little scared. She held Elias' hand tightly. He knelt down. "It will pass," he said softly. "Storms always do." Mara wrapped an arm around Lena too. The three of them sat like that, watching the rain through the window. After the storm, the air was fresh and clean. The fields glowed brighter than ever. More messages began to come in. Other colonies wanted to learn. Other travelers wanted to visit. The ranch became a small light on the star maps, marked as a place of rest, help, and kindness. One night, Mara stood in the growing field, looking at the rows of plants that now stretched far beyond what she had first planted. "I never thought I would build something this big," she said. Elias stood beside her. "Neither did I." Lena ran through the rows, her laughter echoing under the stars. Elias watched her, then looked at Mara. "You know," he said slowly, "this place started because you and Lena landed here by accident." Mara smiled. "Some accidents are just stories we don't understand yet." Elias nodded. The ranch was no longer just a home. It was a beginning. The stars above Hearth 9 shone quietly, reflecting in the glowing fields below. Ships came and went, carrying pieces of the ranch to distant worlds in the form of seeds, ideas, and kindness. The ranch on Hearth 9 had been on star maps for many years now. It was not marked with a flag or a large symbol. It was marked with a small, soft light. Travelers who saw it knew what it meant. It meant rest. It meant help. It meant kindness. The twin suns rose and fell like they always had, painting the fields in gold and blue. The glowing plants spread across the land, their soft light reaching farther each season. The floating herd creatures drifted through the air, humming their gentle songs. The wind carried voices now, not just silence. Lena was taller than she used to be. Her hair was longer, and her laugh carried across the fields like music. She ran between the ships that landed each week, helping travelers carry small bags, pointing out the safest paths and telling stories about the ranch. "This is where the stars come to rest," she liked to say. Mara stood in the main growing field, teaching a group of young scientists how to plant the glowing seeds. Her hands moved with calm and care. Her eyes shone with pride when she saw the plants take root in new soil. "These plants don't just grow food," she said. "They grow hope. They remind people that life can begin again, even in hard places." Elias worked near the barn, fixing a traveler's broken engine. His hair was touched with gray now, but his hands were steady and strong. He still did not speak much, but when he did, people listened. He had become more than a rancher. He had become a guide. One morning, a large ship landed near the field. It was clean and bright, with symbols of many worlds painted on its side. A group of visitors stepped out, wearing simple uniforms and carrying small data pads. They were from the central systems. They had heard stories about the ranch and wanted to see it for themselves. Lena ran up to them, smiling wide. "Welcome," she said. "Do you want to see the floating friends first or the glowing fields?" The visitors laughed, surprised by her confidence. "The fields," one of them said. She led them across the land, pointing out the different plants and explaining how they grew in cold soil, dry ground, and broken earth. Mara joined them, answering their questions with patience and care. Elias followed behind, watching, ready to help if needed. The visitors spoke quietly among themselves. They had seen many places in the galaxy. They had seen great cities and powerful stations. But they had never seen anything like this. This place did not shine with metal and light. It shone with people. That evening, everyone gathered near the heat lamps. Travelers, visitors, workers, and families sat together, sharing food and stories. One of the visitors stood up. "We came here to learn how this place works," she said. "We thought we would find some great system or technology, but what we found was something else." She looked around at the faces in the soft light. "You built this with care, with time, with trust. This is something the galaxy needs more of." Lena clapped. Mara smiled. Elias looked down, a little uncomfortable but proud. Later that night, Lena sat between Mara and Elias, looking up at the stars. "Do you remember when I asked you something a long time ago?" she asked Elias. He nodded. "I do. I didn't know it would make all this," she said, waving her hand at the glowing fields and the quiet ships in the distance. Elias smiled. "Sometimes small words travel very far." Mara rested her head lightly against Elias' shoulder. "You know," she said, "you never really answered her back then." Elias thought for a moment. "I think I did," he said softly, "just not with words." The years continued to pass. The ranch became a training place for people who wanted to help other worlds. Engineers learned how to fix old machines. Farmers learned how to grow in hard soil. Teachers learned how to build small schools in quiet corners of the galaxy. Lena became one of those teachers. She traveled sometimes, carrying seeds and stories to faraway places. But she always came back. "This is home," she would say. One day, a small, damaged ship landed near the field. A woman stepped out holding a child close. She looked tired. She looked afraid. Lena saw her and walked over just like she always did. "You're safe here," Lena said gently. The woman's shoulders relaxed and she began to cry. Elias watched from a distance. He felt a quiet circle closing, a story beginning again. That night the stars were bright and clear. The wind moved through the fields and the herd creatures hummed their soft songs. Elias stood alone near the edge of the land, looking out at everything that had grown from one quiet place and one small wish. Mara joined him. "Thinking?" she asked. "Remembering," he said. They stood in silence, watching the light from the ranch spread across the dark ground. Lena ran up to them, holding a small glowing plant in her hands. "Look," she said, "this one grew all by itself." Elias knelt down and examined it. It just needed the right place. Myra smiled. "Don't we all?" The ranch on Hearth 9 was no longer just a point on a map. It was a promise. A promise that no matter how far someone traveled, no matter how lost they felt, there would always be a place where they could stop, breathe, and begin again.